Hey, welcome to another episode of the Clicks to Customers podcast. I'm your host, John Horn, CEO of StubGroup, and today we have a special guest. Brian Massey is a conversion scientist, hence the lab coat we got going on here. Conversion scientist at conversionsciences.com. Brian, thanks so much for joining today.
I'm glad to be here.
Well, I'm excited to talk all things conversion optimization with you
My
and
favorite
talk
topic.
about how can businesses make more out of the traffic that they're getting to their websites. So let's maybe start high level. How do you define what conversion rate optimization is?
First of all, the name that we've given it, conversion rate optimization, is not the best. We do optimize for conversion rates, but that's just a piece of the puzzle. If you wanted to find out what your customers thought of your website, and you could do this with products and everything, you'd generally gather 5 or 10 or 12 of them together and put them in a room. And we call it a focus group, right? And you would ask them questions about their experience as they're using it. Focus groups are kind of problematic because people like to be smart, so they're going to talk about and criticize things that really wouldn't have gotten in the way of them purchasing from your site. They're going to tell you the things that you want to hear, and it's uh, remarkably easy for us to signal what we're getting at when we're asking questions. Um, so it's an effective way to get some feedback on what you're trying to do, but there's a giant focus group that you have access to every day, and it's the people that are coming to your website trying to solve the problems that you solve, and sorting through your site. And we're almost all of us are tracking that through something as inexpensive as Google Analytics. Wouldn't call it easy, but it is an amazing resource. So if you can imagine the hundreds, the thousands, the hundreds of thousands of people coming to your website every month, as a focus group, you have the opportunity to go in and see how they're behaving. Analytics is the first wave of defense here. So we can go in and see how many people are coming to those money pages where we're either asking them to become a lead, or those product pages where we're asking them to buy our products. And how many of them are seeing that? How many of them are adding to cart? How many of them are buying? How many of them are completing our lead generation forms? Even that simple piece of information, what we consider fairly simple, a lot of business owners aren't looking at. So they're not getting a good idea of which of their pages are really contributing to their business and not. So when you do start looking at that, you're going to find some that are like, wow, there's 1,000 people coming to this page and only one of them is buying. There's something going on here. That's when we can look at the page. We can use some additional tools, heat map reports and scroll map reports, to get an idea of how people are interacting with the pages as a group, the people that are seeing it, and begin to formulate some ideas as to what's going on with these parts of the website that are keeping people from doing what we want them to do. And if they're on our website, odds are very good that they're trying to solve a problem that we solve. So that forms the basis of us. Once we have these ideas, then we can say like, oh yeah, it's really clear what's going on here, and you go and you fix the problem. For the things that are left over, it's like, I wonder if this is a problem. The content is not in the right order, or it's not really obvious that they're supposed to click on this to move forward, or they're getting confused over here. Those become ideas that we can design some experiments for. And we do use customer research, which is the equivalent of having giant focus groups. You can get 25, 50, 100 people look at the site and ask them some questions about what they think is going on. And that's a great way to vet different kinds of ideas and tools. The best data we can collect, though, is an A/B test, where we actually design a new version of the page, and we show the first person the old page, the second person the new page, and we keep alternating until we reach this thing called statistical significance. And basically, we find out which of those pages generates the most leads, generates the most sales, whatever it is you're trying to optimize for. And so that's kind of the breadth of conversion optimization, we can change anything. We can change copy, we can change layout, we can change design, we can change the offers, we can change the calls to action. So it's a pretty comprehensive space that we can work with to make websites better. And these tests just make sure that we're not guessing poorly.
Love to dig into a number of the things you mentioned there. Let's maybe start first. So you mentioned that a lot of business owners don't even know to look at analytics, for example. What are some of the other most common maybe issues that you see when you first start working with a new client? You're helping them, improve things. What are some of the things that businesses, website managers just do wrong over and over again when it comes to optimizing for conversions?
In terms of optimizing, well, I think having that, what we call the baseline. So how's the site doing now? Where are the problems on the site? The analytics packages they're not user-friendly to someone who's not familiar with them. But just as if you were running a brick and mortar store, you would drive in maybe every day, at least once a week, and you would get an idea of how people are shopping. You would see how your sales clerks are supporting that. You'd be looking at when people are lingering on certain merchandising areas. This is really the best way for you to walk around your digital store. So I think it requires a up-leveling of literacy. As a business owner or as the e-commerce manager, you should be able to go in and begin asking questions about everything from what pages are working to how your ads are driving people through the system, how your emails are working, things like that. Should you be sending more often, et cetera? So I think upping your literacy on these analytics tools is a must. It's going to be a little uncomfortable at first because finding your way around the reports can be a little daunting.
Yeah.
And then beyond that, having some sort of a systematic way of improving your site. So people look at their site and say it's not converting well, so let's redesign the whole thing. Let's just redesign it all. It needs a refresh.
Yep.
And all you're doing there is taking whatever bad choices were made in the previous incarnation and then making a whole bunch of new choices, some of which will be good, some of which will be bad, and then launching that whole thing. So after all the expense, you don't really find out how good a job you did until after you've redesigned and launched everything. Conversion optimization is really redesigning your site, but you're doing it fairly rigorously, changing one thing at a time so that when I change the copy to say these things, I have a lift in conversion rate. When I present the value proposition in this order, I have a lift in conversion rate. When I make the buttons giant instead of little tiny, I have a lift in conversion rate. So you begin to understand not only what's going to improve your business, but you begin to understand your prospects and your customers.
So being very intentional with what you're changing, having a reason behind it, not just, oh, it's not working, so let's change everything. And then tracking what actually happens after you make those changes.
Yeah. I mean, even if you're going to change things and see what happens, that before and after analysis it's like a test. Every change to your website should be a test where you go back and say, so how did this perform? Did the heat maps change when I changed this page? Those sorts of things.
I've seen a lot of business owners focus on, let's say they're using their website on their computer and they won't even think about, what does their website look like on a tablet or on a phone. We had a situation just this week we identified where on mobile, which happened to be where most of the traffic for the client's website was coming from, there was an issue with their forms where the CAPTCHA was like hiding the submit button. And so people literally couldn't submit a form. And the client's web team didn't catch that because they just went on their computer to the page with the form and they submitted a form and it went through. It was fine because it was only an issue on mobile. And it wasn't until we started digging through, okay, with different devices, things like, okay, there's a problem. And so I think it's things like that often that business owners just aren't thinking of. Like you said, don't have a process in place to routinely check their website across different use cases to find what those obstacles might be.
Yeah. We're very visual animals. So when we're designing web pages or designing a website, we tend to really focus on the visuals. So we've incentivized our design teams and our agencies to do things that look good, look professional, and that's important. You know, you want to put your best foot forward and you want to look like you know you've got your stuff together. But they're not designing for what the business needs. And so you end up with pretty pages that visitors find cognitively difficult to get through, or it doesn't have enough information because the designer decided a clean look was what they wanted to go for. So, um, when we're doing QA, we go and look in analytics at the various devices and operating systems that the visitors are coming in on, and look at the top 10, and we will look at the site through each of those. We use a tool called Browser Stack that allows us to incarnate any device so that we can see how it works through different screen sizes, different browsers, different phone types, tablets, etc. It's important. And design firms and design teams that aren't focused on conversion won't see that as important because, the mobile site is really just a smaller version of the desktop site. But when we're doing optimization, the mobile site actually will take a different direction than the desktop site because you need different things and it's a different context.
Yeah. Yeah, like you said, the goal of design is not to look pretty; it's to drive conversions, to drive that action. And
it's heartbreaking how often ugly wins in our A/B tests.
It really
Design
is.
a beautiful experience and just like, nope.
Yep.
Users like the old one.
Absolutely. So you mentioned this concept of can't talk today, of statistical significance. And I'd love to dig into that a little bit, especially, let's say, in the context of websites that don't get a lot of visitors on a monthly basis. Let's say, maybe 1,000 users or less on a monthly basis.
Mhm.
I guess my first question is it possible to do true A/B testing with that kind of a sample size? Is there enough people to get statistical significance? And maybe I'll ask that first, and then I got some follow-up questions after that.
Yeah, a good rule of thumb. So A/B testing does take quite a bit of work. It takes dev and design resources, somebody who's analytical and can design the test. And so the rule of thumb that we use is it's going to take about 100 or 150 conversions. It actually isn't direct. We don't even directly measure the traffic, but the number of conversions that you're getting. 100 to 150 conversions per variation. So if you want to test an idea, say like, we think this page could be made better if we redesign it this way, you'll need 100 to 150 conversions for the control and 150 conversions for the variation. So I would say 300 conversions is probably the floor for really doing A/B testing. For smaller businesses, first of all, designing for conversion is conversion optimization. So tasking your team or hiring a design team that is going to always have that in mind. Like, how are we guiding the visitor through an understanding of who we are, what our value proposition is, what our solutions are, what the cost and the deliverability and colors and whatever the issues are. And when they buy, walking them through a checkout process that makes sense. Design is the first level of that. And like I said, we're visual and we're going to spend a lot of time on the colors and the fonts and the tagline and how big the logo should be. And those things rarely significantly impact conversion. So spending more time on how you talk about yourself, how you're presenting your navigation, how you're laying out your pages, your product pages are absolutely critical. Do you have the right photography for your products? Are you using images that support what's being said in the words on your page rather than just stock photos? Those things are all very important. And then beyond that, changing things purposefully and doing a before and after analysis, like looking at how the conversion rate has changed for the things you need to happen is kind of the next level. For those businesses that maybe they have 200 conversions a month or 150, there are some strategies for low volume A/B testing. For instance, home run testing, where we're going to run the test for a month. We know we don't have statistical significance, but we're expecting to see a giant increase. And if we don't, we assume it's inconclusive. So
Mm,
it's like, wow, this is going to be a 30% increase for low volumes, non-statistical significance. It's not a big enough lift for us to say, let's move forward with that. Good.
mm,
50 or 100% increases. So you test through a lot of ideas very quickly,
mm.
and only the ones that are home runs right out the gate do you say like, okay, I think we can bet on this.
In that type of paradigm, would you generally recommend more radical tests? So, not different color button, but hey, different offer, or kind of long description versus short description. Is that fair, or you say no? You could still do a different button color and see if there's a home run difference there.
Yeah, well, I mean, button color is one of those things that's going to have an incremental impact. We already know the answer. Just create your calls to action should be on a button that's a different color from the rest of the page. So it essentially pops up to the top of the visual hierarchy. Beyond that, it doesn't seem to matter that much what the color is. Those things have what we call a low effect size. They're going to have a low impact. Just like putting something in the footer of the page is going to have a low impact. So the answer is yes, you may only be able to test with relatively lower volumes, bigger effects. But keep in mind that changing the headline on a landing page can have a very big effect.
Yeah.
It has to be a fundamentally different direction for that headline, going from something that's conceptual and clever to something that's functional and here's what we do.
Mhm.
So the answer is yes. Sometimes when you have low volumes, you're really not going to be able to learn much about your customers. So you're really looking for those exploitative tests that where they're telling you with their wallets that and whatever changes you've made more good decisions than bad decisions as far as they're concerned.
Good way to put it. Got it. No, that's super helpful. I think it's really important advice, because especially when you're using, kind of some of the out of the box A/B testing tools, let's say, Unbounce or something like that, they generally tell you that things are statistically significant pretty quickly. I've done tests myself with Unbounce where, it's 10, 20 conversions and it's saying, hey, this one over here is winning. And that's probably deceptive, it sounds like. I'm not saying maliciously deceptive, but it gives you the wrong impression maybe of whether or not version A truly is beating version B.
Mhm. Yeah, and you can use that as directional information. So if it's 10 versus 20, you're looking at 100% increase in conversion rates.
Mm,
Those sample sizes are relatively small. I would let that keep running, but in that sense, you have some data that says, oh, this might be a good idea. So you might go ahead with that, change it, and make sure that you're still seeing that once you change it and put it on 100% of the traffic, make sure that you're still seeing that effect. Of course, you're probably moving on to testing something else. So consider it directional, but it is probably still a little bit better data than your designer, your web developer, a small number of brains making decisions about what goes on a page.
mm,
Um, and it's a skill set that will pay off for you. So
mm.
you might grow and be bigger than that. You might change careers and work for a bigger company. And so you've got this skill, which is being able to run these A/B tests. So
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to chat for a couple minutes about the buzzword about AI,
mhm.
and I'm curious across a number of fronts. Maybe the first one I'll go into is, I think part of the promise of AI is this kind of hyper personalization of, hey, everybody can see an experience that's personalized to them, which is quite a bit different than the idea of, okay, well, let's send half the people to this version, half the people to that version, see on average what performs better and so forth. So I'd love to kind of get your thoughts on that, on like the promise supposedly of AI, and if you're seeing any interesting use cases yet where sites are kind of truly personalizing the experience to each user and doing that in a way that it is increasing the overall conversions, or if you haven't seen that and that's not really a workable technology yet.
Well, so even the AI needs quite a bit of data to learn on. So for small and mid-sized businesses, we're not seeing that sort of an approach. And for those small and mid-sized businesses, they're a little bit more focused on really understanding their visitors. So there's the exploratory test in which you're trying to learn something fundamental about, it could be the way you're presenting your value proposition. It could be your pricing. It could be the way you're bundling things. And then there's exploitative tests, which are just like, we're going to change this. Button color would fall into that. Like, we're just going to change this and it's going to magically increase our conversion rates. The value of AI is that it enables us to do something that has always been really difficult, and that is change the voice of our messaging. So every every website has somebody that's writing the copy. You might hire a copywriter. A lot of the times it's written internally, and it's very functional. It's like, here's what we know about the product, and we're going to put this on the page, and it's going to educate the visitor. There are visitors who are looking for something more emotional, or they have a different way of evaluating issues. So some people are very methodical and they need a whole lot of details. Some people are very spontaneous and they're just looking for, I just want to try this. So like, you have a free trial or something like that. And so writing for those different kinds of people is very difficult because we tend to write the stuff we like. We write for ourselves, even when we're trying to be more methodical. And so the language models don't have this problem. You can tell them, like, someone's coming and they're a very methodical searcher, rewrite my copy for this person, and you will be very surprised at how different it is. In fact, you'll probably hate it. This is the next problem, is like the AI rewrites it and you're like, oh, I don't like this, but it's going to appeal potentially to a large segment of your audience. That's more exciting to me right now. And when you do an A/B test around messaging like this, you really do begin to understand the different kinds of visitors and how they want to be spoken to. More detail, less detail, things like that. So that's pretty exciting. It's really only the larger businesses that are getting millions of visits that are in a position where it's like, okay, we're going to run an A/B test and we're trying to detect effects that are less than 1% increase, but they have the volume, they can reach statistical significance. I think it will be a while before we're not building on things like Shopify, but we're building on Shopify.ai, and it's taking what it's learned from all the businesses like yours and what it knows about the visitor and setting something up very differently, like redesigning your site for every visitor.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm also curious on, not the flip side, but kind of a different angle of AI. Are there any ways that you're using AI yourself that you're enjoying, whether it be streamlining your job or helping out with ideation or something else? Are there anything where you're like, oh yeah, this is a cool way that we're using it right now?
Yeah, building out personas and ICPs in the proper detail. So usually when we get personas, there's a lot of demographics, some general things that they care about, and some things about their personality. Even whether they're a man or woman or how old they are, things that are often only tangentially important to design. But for instance, we have a client that sells Mack truck scales. So in a warehouse, the truck's leaving, make sure it's not overweight. It has to drive it up onto a scale. So these are giant things. I'm a conversion scientist. How hard is it going to be for me to understand what's going on in the mind of the warehouse manager that is looking at this scale? Well, the language models have a lot of background, a lot of data on this. So you can ask them, what are your primary care abouts? Who else are you going to have to convince to make this sale? What other competitors are you going to be considering? What regulations do you have to fit in? What are the primary concerns that you have? What happened in your job this week that made you say, I need another truck scale? The language models can really fill in the blanks very quickly. What used to take a lot of interviews and talking to customers and things like that can really be answered in the scope of 20, 30 minutes of
Mhm.
querying a good language model. So that's been a big help.
Yeah, that's a fantastic use case. And I can definitely speak to that, here as well as we're, doing advertising, doing marketing for clients and yeah, I was saying, okay, like you said, what do people care about? What does the audience care about? What are maybe some different personas that would make sense for this type of product? And yeah, it's just like having a very intelligent person you can have a conversation with that has access to a tremendous amount of information and get it all done right away. So, and I'm excited to see where things continue to go in that space as well as every day seems to be new. I want to circle back to analytics for a minute, just because I have some some pet peeves about Google Analytics, I guess maybe I'll say. But yeah, the current version of Google Analytics, the GA4, obviously a big change from Universal Analytics, what we had for many years. I'd love to just get your take. Like, how do you feel about where Google Analytics is right now? Is it the best thing for kind of the average business to use as analytics on their website, or is there something else that you would point people to instead?
It is harder to use, but it's harder to make mistakes. So the old version of Google Analytics was much more user-friendly, but you could pretty easily generate some reports that were crap data. You know, mixing users and events and things like that. So it would do its best to give you an answer, kind of like the language models, actually. So there's some better guardrails on it. There are some, it's full of a lot of gotchas. Like if you want to go in and find information about, one of the parameters on an event that your website is sending, you have to go through some extra steps to even have visibility in it. But it does funnel reports and graphs, and the graphs are not as pleasant to look at as UA was, and I think that's an important part of the user interface.
Mm-hmm.
And there are dashboards that you can put on top of Google Analytics that are really easy to set up, but the truth is that that's when you want to drill in and find out why something happened on your dashboard, you end up having to go back to Google Analytics. So it is, I think if you're running a digital business, it's worth buying a course, hiring a consultant to walk you through it. That's the way I learned, is like getting in and making mistakes. And maybe even getting familiar with some of the APIs that would pull data into spreadsheets for you. And most of us are much more familiar and know how to manipulate spreadsheets. But I think it's important. Google Analytics, the price is right. It's a good tool for free. The more expensive tools, in my experience, aren't that much easier to use. But part of that is that I've been using Google Analytics since 2006. So I have kind of an orientation towards the way they think.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, no, everything you're saying there jives. You could probably, yeah, the usability, like you said, of GA4 has significantly decreased compared to UA. But I think there's probably a lot of biases in a lot of us that it's like, oh, it's a new thing. I don't want to learn the new thing. And just what was working, I want to keep using that. So you just gotta put the elbow grease in to figure out the new approach, and then find some of those benefits as well that you mentioned that have come with that new approach.
And we tend to become kind of a data utility. So whenever a business owner has a question, they can come to us and we know how to answer it. So having someone like that is can be really helpful.
Absolutely. Well, Brian, really appreciate the wisdom you've shared today and the insights. I've definitely learned some things. I'm sure those watching and listening have learned as well. As we kind of wrap things up here, tell me, if you would, tell those listening, what types of businesses do you like to work with there at conversionsciences.com? And what is the best way for someone who's listening to this to reach out and explore working together with you?
Yeah, we're a great fit for the mid-market. 50 or 60% of our business is catalog e-commerce companies. Another chunk is kind of specialty e-commerce companies that, for instance, sell air conditioning filters. And lead generation, business to business and business to customer lead generation kind of rounds the rest of that out. So, by mid-market, I mean, we only work occasionally with these giant brands, the enterprise level brands, and we have a much better cultural fit when working with business owners and the people that report directly to the business owners.
Well, if Brian and the work that he and his team are doing over there at Conversion Sciences sounds like something that would help you out, please go check out conversionsciences.com. Lots more information on there. And we'll put links to that in the show notes description here. Brian, again, thanks so much for coming on. And to everyone watching and listening, thanks for your time. And we'll see you next time on the next episode of the Clicks to Customers podcast.